Hi, this is Ollie with a tiny bit of housekeeping before we get started. Going forward, our episodes will be coming out every other week rather than weekly. Thank you all for listening. We both appreciate every single one of you. Welcome to Marveling at the MCU, a podcast that mixes geekdom with nostalgia as a comic book geek and a film nerd rewatch the movies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I'm Ollie Lewington, and I'm the resident film nerd.
My name is David O'Hara, and I'm a comic book geek.
Today is a slightly different episode to normal. We thought now we've successfully completed the first saga and we're about to dive into the next one, it'd be worth us considering what we all knew at the beginning, because I find it quite easy to forget how little we knew about what to expect, because we're sort of so used to this whole multiverse concept at this point.
So, the end of the Infinity Saga. Did the end of the Infinity Saga live up to the hype, do you think?
Yes. I mean, yes, it did, because
Yes, that's it. Podcast done.
because Endgame was one of the greatest films that's ever been produced. So
Yeah, to be fair, yeah.
it's hard to say. Or I guess if you actually want to word the question of did the end of the Infinity Saga
Mhm.
live up to the hype, Spider-Man is a slightly underwhelming ending. Now, we did talk about that in Spider-Man
Yes,
and
in
whether
Spider-Man.
or not it actually counts as the end or the beginning or just something weird in between. But I think, in the spirit of the question, yes, of course
Yes,
it did. Of course it
yes, of course it did. I mean, like if we think back to it, when did it feel that they were building to something special? Because we, as we're saying, we refer to it as the Infinity Saga, but I'm flashing back now when we really felt like we were on the road to it. Like
So
I think for
the,
me, Avengers was it when Thanos steps up at the end?
so I think that's when you started to get. I remember you
Getting
saying
excited.
at the time, and I remember you saying on the original Avengers episode of this show, I remember you saying that that's what got you really excited and got you thinking about they're building to something.
Yep,
And
yep.
I think like we all became aware when I think Captain America was announced, the original Captain America movie was announced. There was this sense of, oh, they're going to build these films together into something that delivers us to the Avengers.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
I think by the time Avengers was done, and particularly seeing Thanos at the end, my memory of that is that it was then you guys, particularly the comic geeks of the world, got really excited because it wasn't just that these kind of 5, 6 films had built to this crescendo, but that actually there was something else to build towards
Yeah.
as well.
It was a special moment. I do remember that. Yeah, and yeah, like you say, it felt like we were on the roller coaster to somewhere. And then as we moved through the films and started getting mentions of the Infinity Gems, and that's when it, like solidified that we're definitely building up to that rather than just Thanos
Yeah,
because it's an
yeah.
iconic
So
Thanos storyline. So yeah,
it was Thor: The Dark World, wasn't it, when we first got this hint of the Infinity Stone storyline coming in.
yes, because they mentioned it in the post-credit scene, didn't they?
The Tesseract is already on Asgard. It is not wise to keep two Infinity Stones so close together.
That's right.
And you're like, click, there we go.
I mean, you
I
think of that straight away. I
yeah,
go, yes, it's definitely not wise to keep them
keep
together.
two things I've never heard of before together.
So once you got this kind of direct mention of Infinity Stones,
Yep.
how long did it take you to realize the sort of size of this arc that they were building?
I
Because
mean,
obviously we were still only on film 7.
That's about right. 7.
I think. Eight.
I,
8.
I don't think I knew obviously how big it was going to be, but I did know that it's not going to happen straight away. That's when you get the impression of this is the long term goal. And I knew that's not going to be something they're going to resolve in the next film, for example. We're not going to suddenly have the whole gauntlet when they've teased 2 gems. In my head, I seem to remember that it's like, okay, so obviously, whereas it won't be the main thrust of a story, we're going to keep seeing these things pop up. And then eventually, in my head, I was like, eventually, then we will get to the gauntlet. And yeah, and then they just threw. So I didn't know. I don't think I knew how long it would take to get there. I think because had Avengers 2 been announced at this point? I can't even remember. See, it's so long ago.
It does feel
It does
that
feel so
long
long
ago.
ago.
I mean, I don't think when Dark World
But
was released, I think yes, we knew that there was going to be another one, but it
I
was
don't
still
think.
a couple of years away.
Yeah, no, I don't think at that point I thought, okay, the next Avengers film will definitely deal with that. I had the inkling that it didn't. I wasn't under the impression that they were going to rush to it.
Yeah, and I mean that at that particular point, that was something that the MCU had taught us was, we're not going to come straight into the MCU with the Avengers. We're going to
Yeah,
build to it
we're
and
going to build to it.
introduce
Yeah,
the characters first. And similarly with this one, it felt like, particularly because it was a post-credit scene, it wasn't something that was just going to immediately get resolved in the next film or the next couple of films. It was, okay, so they're laying
their
the
groundwork into
foundations
this.
for something coming further down the line, but it wasn't entirely clear what and when it was going to happen. I think it was the point at which we knew that Guardians of the Galaxy was on its way, so we were about to go into the kind of the
Into the space,
space
into the
realm,
cosmos. Yeah,
and yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it?
yeah.
The Infinity Saga is the only example in the history of cinema of a series of films starting from movie 1 all the way through to movie 22 with Endgame, of essentially one story thread running through the entire history of those films, from 2008 and Iron Man to 2019 and Endgame
Yeah.
/ Spider-Man Far From Home. And it's such a strange thing to think of now, how completely novel that was within the film world. It just, no one had ever done it before, and certainly no one yet has done it as successfully. Even Marvel haven't done it as
Yeah, I was gonna say,
successfully again.
Even Marvel can't replicate that. I mean,
And
it is
so it was,
ambitious.
it's huge.
Well, because it's just super difficult as well when you really get down to it, because you have to have the time and patience to do it. You have to have the material to do it, and material that is going to work. Because, like, didn't they briefly start doing some horror-esque? They wanted to try and do that with, like, the Mummy and things like that.
Yeah, they tried to redo. They were going to do Wolfman.
Yeah.
They tried, and it was, well, Tom Cruise torpedoed it because he did the Mummy, and it was terrible. And
it was terrible.
Went, oh, let's not do any more of those.
Yeah, but that's what I'm saying. Like, because they didn't have, at least in the comic universe, you have the raw materials that these are popular stories. No matter if of your opinions of Marvel, DC, and stuff, at the end of the day, these are two very successful comic book companies. So you have, like you have the raw materials to make this series. You have of films. It's just having the time and patience to do it. Like, in theory, DC could absolutely have done it, but they didn't. And then they tried to play catch up because they want, like, say, they went straight for the big guns and straight for the gun, and that was the beauty of the saga, because the Infinity Saga, because they had taken their time and they laid the groundwork, they'd done the work, and it really showed, because you didn't jump straight in with Cap Iron Man and Thor, suddenly the Avengers are there, and suddenly we're facing Thanos. Like, DC. I'm not casting shade on them, but I suspect they were doubtful it was going to work, and then they saw it. Oh, it's actually making quite a lot of money, and it's doing really well. I want a piece of that. But by that point, you're really far behind, so they wanted to try and catch up, and it just didn't work as well. Like they could have absolutely had a slow grow thing as well, but they just wanted to jump straight to it. But
Yeah, I think you're
I'm not
right.
trying to be harsh on that. I'm really not. It just didn't work as well.
No, I mean
Yeah.
it didn't, and it hasn't. It remains to be seen. What we're recording this the end of April 2025, and it kind of remains to be seen what James Gunn manages to do with the DC universe that he is supposedly creating at this
I mean,
point.
I'm optimistic. I'll give him a fair shout. I like James Gunn, but we'll see.
Exactly. And I think the other thing that is easy to forget when we're looking back at it with this sort of nostalgic
Yeah, nostalgic.
view that we have of the whole thing, and the nostalgia is part of the reason we started this podcast in the first place. But it's easy to forget that actually, for the vast majority of the saga, they've always had kind of get out clauses, essentially. Like, they haven't been forced, they haven't painted themselves into a corner at any point. They've kind of, yes, they set up the Infinity Stones at the end of the Dark World.
But what you're
But
saying is they could have at any point jumped to the final story.
they could have jumped to the final story or abandoned it altogether.
Yeah.
And just gone, oh yeah, no, it was just a nice
It
little.
was just a tease.
Tag on the end of a film, and it made people excited because they saw the collector for once.
Yeah,
they've always had a way of moving the story forward, but also keeping it contained enough that you could bail out of it if you wanted to bail out of it. And I think even coming up to sort of the first standalone Spider-Man film or Black Panther, you could have walked away from things. You weren't like, it would have been weirder for sure because you've introduced a lot of these different things, but the movies were successful enough on their own that you didn't need this unifying thread. And I think that's possibly part of what made it exciting, was that it became a card collecting game. It was like, I want to have seen all of these because it enriches my viewing experience, not I have to have seen all of these in order to understand what's going on in the world.
So moving on from the epicness of the Infinity Saga, we get introduced to the multiverse.
Yes. So I have a question about the multiverse.
Oh, go on.
We know all about the multiverse.
Of course.
We, over the course of particularly the most recent few episodes, we talked about the different universes that exist within the comic world, and it's all the Earth 616 and everything else. But is the multiverse concept a part of the comics, or are they all standalone universes that are sort of treated separately?
No, so and the multiverse is absolutely a thing in the comics, in both Marvel and DC. And I think DC used to lean on it a bit more heavily than Marvel did. So in Marvel comics, yes, the multiverse absolutely exists, and it's very central to how they tell stories across different timelines, realities, and in particular the what if kind of storyline scene, which is where you can have a bit of fun with stuff, and you can try things out, and they're all count as technically their own universe and stuff like that. So the Marvel universe isn't just one world, it's a multiverse. It's a collection of many universes, either slightly different or drastically different. The main one being, as we've said, 616. kind of thing, and that's the default universe for most of the comics. So like your classic Spider-Man, X-Men, Avengers, and so on. And like alongside that, you've got the countless other universes, each with their own versions of the characters. So I think Earth 1610, which is Ultimate Universe, my favorite. Well, it was my favorite, with characters like and where Miles Morales first appeared, or Earth 65, where Gwen Stacy became Spider-Woman. There's all these different like alternative words which are all part officially of the multiverse. Yeah, and sometimes characters will travel between them, like the Spider-Verse, the into Spider-Verse kind of thing. Secret Wars in 2015. What If comics again? They explore these things. So yeah, and then the numbered Earths. Yeah, they each other and do so 616, 1610, and so on and so on, all different worlds. And yeah, it's the way of exploring endless possibilities while still keeping the main universe intact, so you can be a bit crazy and not mess with the status quo.
Yeah.
Sometimes, so it gives you lots of things, and like the multiverse again, like the origin. I think like 616 was, it was first used in, it was 1980s or something like that. I think it was written by Alan Moore, or he popularised the term, and his fellow writer, I think, credited it in early Captain Britain or something like that.
Right.
And like you had Captain Britain and the Multiverse, which is the Captain Britain Corps, which I think was like a multiverse team, and each member represents a different universe, and they created to protect the Omniverse. And so yeah, it's been around for ages, and like things like Secret Wars in 2015 and Battle World, which was an event where multiple universes collide, and then you get, like say, the creation of Battle World and this patchwork planet, which is composed of like fragments of various realities, and that means you can then like mesh storylines from different realities into the main continuity. Like for example, Miles Morales can then join the main 616, and so sometimes it's a way to get them to crush. Like if a character is really popular in a thing and you feel like it's wasted there and you want to bring it into the main universe, then there's a way, and that's normally how they do it. Like even the old TVA, the Time Variance Authority from like Loki, that was in 1986, I believe. That was first, like, that was in Thor in like the 80s. That's when that came about. And all the staff, I think they were clones of one of the writers, Mark Grindelwald or something like that, as like a little bit of a nod toward him. So yeah, so that again, that's something that's been around forever, in a minor way. So it's really cool that they picked it out in Loki. Like Deadpool, we always like Deadpool. He because he breaks the fourth wall a lot. He's known to like be aware of it all. Like
Right.
he knows he's in the comics, and because he breaks the fourth wall all the time. So he's one of the ways playing nods and stuff like that. But yeah, so it's good fun. But yeah, the multiverse is good for exploring stories, and you can then cherry pick those stories into the main one if you want, because you don't want to mess up the main and because it's a bit fantastical, you can be a bit more freer in it, and you can be more fun. Like in 2000 AD in Judge Dredd, they're very good. They're really like quality stuff, because that, like for example, that advances in real time. So a year in the comics is a year in real life.
Oh wow.
And they stick to it. And from what I remember, now I'm sure if Nick and Roger listen to this and some big 2000, they're going to kill me if I get it wrong. But like I'm pretty sure as well, if characters die, they die, and that is it. Like Dredd's you've never seen his face, and he just gets older and older and older. But they won't like do a what if Dredd dies, because he'll be dead. So they really stick to it. Whereas in Marvel they do, because in fact, like weirdly, on the timeline subject, I think the Marvels, it's like a sliding time scale, because like if you think about it, like in the X-Men origins and stuff like that, like Magneto was in the concentration camps, and we're now in 2025. So how old is he? But it's a bit, it means they can still keep their, not be like aged out of existence, stuff like that. So everything's I think everything takes place within like 10 to 15 years of the 1960s. But so it's very weird. But like I said, the multiverse, you can have a bit more fun with it, especially in the X-Men. And they like doing alternative realities and stuff like that a lot. But it's yes, it is a concept. The downside is it can get really confusing, because you can also sometimes lose some of the magic of a story if it's just another alternative reality, or we're in another real reality all along. And that's the double-edged sword of it. I know, because again, DC did a lot of times, they did like Crisis on Infinite Earth and stuff like that, which is where they because of all these different, like Earth 1, Earth 2, Earth 3, all that stuff like that, they would occasionally cleanse it by destroying the multiverse, stuff like that. And then, like, because they did, like, there's 52 comic where they had 52 realities left, and that was the entire multiverse, and then they only had these 52 set things they could play around in. So it kind of limited the multiverse. So it wasn't out of control. And then it all went mad again, of course. But yeah. So no, yes, a long rambling way of saying yes, there is a multiverse.
Yes.
It absolutely exists in the comics. So it's no surprise that it came up in the films, and it was really nice. Obviously, looking back now, because like at this point, you know, we hadn't had Deadpool at this point, but now they acknowledge all the other, like the Fox universe and things like that, as different realities, which is a lovely way of nodding the stuff that's come before without being committed to it.
Yeah. So here's a question then.
Go on then.
So if in the comics, Earth 616 is like basically what we would refer to in our understanding of it as like the sacred timeline.
Yes.
And so everything else kind of branches off it and is different versions of the same thing, but it all kind of comes back to that one thing. So is the MCU its own sacred timeline, or does it count as a separate version?
It is a separate version. It is its own reality.
But it's also got its own specific timeline that now also has variances.
They're still variances of the original, because the 616 isn't the original, so to speak. It's just a reality. It's just the one that we associate with because it's the comic main reality.
Yeah.
So they all have their own. It's like, I guess, like in Doctor Strange, they say about, you know, the universe is one of an infinite number. They start talking about it, and they got the dark dimension. Now, the dark dimension, I believe, is the dark dimension for that reality. So if there's another, like Earth 1610, that will have a dark dimension.
Yeah.
So they'll have their own, I think, reality. It's one of these things where it gets a bit timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly, Doctor Who-y kind of thing.
Yes.
People assume that time is a strict progression of cause to effect, but actually, from a non-linear, non-subjective viewpoint, it's more like a big ball of wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff.
Yeah, I've seen this bit before. You said that sentence got away from you.
It got away from me, yeah.
You can go as deep dive into these things or as not as you want, as the writers want, and stuff like that. And that's the like I say, that's the joy and the pain of going too far into the multiverse. you can really become unraveled, or also you can make your head spin, and especially if you try and make logic apply to it, sometimes it doesn't quite work, because also we'll try and shoehorn in real life reasons why it's like what it is.
Yeah,
if that makes sense. It's why it absolutely is a double-edged sword, because you can go crazy just trying to think about and trying to and like some people like the concept of the alternate realities, and some people can't stand them, quite frankly. Yeah, some people I like the original, that, like, for example, the 616 in the comics, that's all I care about. I don't care about any what ifs. I don't care about this, whereas other people love them. So it's a weird thing.
So it's worth saying then, I guess at this point, we've mentioned Loki a couple of times, as in the TV show, not the character. But this is the point at which the sort of small screen world starts interweaving seamlessly with
the films,
the big screen world. And there have been the TV shows that came before. There was Agent Carter,
which is brilliant, and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
and Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. And from, I have to admit, I've watched very few episodes of any of those, but certainly from my understanding of it, in the multiverse world, the Multiverse Saga, everything that happens in the TV shows is reflected in and impacts on the stuff that happens in the movies, and everything that happens in the movies impacts on the TV shows. And it was very kind of one-way traffic with the stuff that happened in the Infinity Saga.
Yes, they'd kind of almost like they'd time check where they were in the films. Like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. started obviously after Avengers, when Coulson died, in inverted commas, and when he was kind of brought back. I believe even Sam Jackson was in a few of them, and then it carried on as a kind of freak of the week type thing, and it was cold. It was kind of enjoyable, but then it kicked up a gear when Winter Soldier happened because they tied in obviously then that like members of the team were actually Hydra agents, and they dealt with that, and it suddenly became proper awesome, and then it kind of ramped up again, culminating in Avengers, the second Avengers film, because the helicarrier, they essentially recover that helicarrier for Fury so that he can do his big dramatic, a rescue of the Avengers and stuff like that. So as you say, it's very you almost like you date check where this series is happening, but as you say, it doesn't. Characters who appeared in that didn't then magically appear in the film. Like Daisy Johnson didn't ever show up in the actual, which is a shame. And because like the characters they'd use, again, they used Graviton, they used Absorbing Man hilariously, but neither of them have actually shown up in. So they're not tied to it. I suspect if they want to do actual Creel Absorbing Man properly, I suspect they'll ignore the one from the TV series, which is a bit of a shame, but there you go. And again, Graviton, I don't think they wouldn't be bound by it. I'm sure they could hand wave it, multiverse it away, or like I say, variance it away. Although Agent Carter, again, brilliant, that technically did because Jarvis was in Endgame.
Yes,
but that's
so they had like a tiny.
It did go back the other way because Jarvis was obviously in the series and is brilliant, and the fact that he did make it into the main film is, I guess, it does acknowledge it. But again, that was very minor and a really cool way. Whereas, as you say, WandaVision directly uses characters who are then directly going to interface with the films, like Multiverse of Madness and stuff like that, as a result of WandaVision, because they even they reference it. So yes, it absolutely does it. And the same with Loki. Well, although I think that'll come, but it is absolutely based on. Yes. Well, because he comes out of the film, that variant of Loki, and then we follow him, and I think it's gonna bear fruit for the actual films. So yeah, 100%.
And I think there's also the fact that, I think one of the things that I'm looking forward to is seeing, because at this point, certainly, we are only looking at the films of the MCU. It's going to be interesting to see them without the immediate context of the TV series, that coming off WandaVision into Multiverse of Madness, for example, we're not going to see that. We're going to be going through the film. So actually WandaVision is outside of our
scope
purview at the minute. And that means that, certainly I'm not going to watch it again until I've seen that. And I've only watched it once so far. And so I've just got the memory of it from whenever it first aired. And I'm interested to see whether or not watching Multiverse of Madness again informs an opinion on that, and whether you kind of look at it and think, actually, does it make sense still? Or are you referring to things that I should have seen but I haven't?
It'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
And how well connected those things are, or how intricately connected they are, I guess.
Yeah, no, it'll be interesting when we get to it.
So when it comes to the multiverse, what we've had so far is, it was the first specific mention of a multiverse was in the first Doctor Strange film.
Yes.
And particularly there's a quote that I will drop in here from the Ancient One when she's first introducing Doctor Strange to the world.
This universe is only one of an infinite number. Worlds without end. Some benevolent and life-giving. Others filled with malice and hunger.
Then we had Endgame, where again the Ancient One helps us set up this idea, and particularly, although it doesn't use the specific language, it's setting up the sacred,
the branching of the timelines,
and the branching that comes off the sacred timeline, which then sets up and leads us directly into Loki, the first season of Loki, and Spider-Man No Way Home being the first film that actually explores what the multiverse is within the MCU.
Isn't that hilarious though, with Quentin Beck, who's basically making it all up?
No, that's a good point
Because
though,
he remember
because there is
they
he does make up a load of stuff.
yes,
doesn't
because
he?
it's
So you're
yeah,
right.
because I mean they mention it for and that's what teases up and gets us excited. But actually, in the concept of the storyline, he was just playing a part. As in, he was
Yes.
hoodwinked, so
So
he doesn't
that-
know technically that there is a multiverse.
So that was Spider-Man.
Oh, that's Far From Home. I'm getting them mixed up. Yeah,
But you're right. That was a reference that I hadn't
twigged.
I hadn't put in our notes. And No Way Home is the first time it's properly
Yes, because we get
explored,
this,
because it's where you get the multiple spider people
and
turning
I
up.
cannot wait till we review that film. I love that film so much.
I'm looking forward to it. I have come so close to watching it so many times since we started recording this podcast, and I've always stopped myself and been like, no,
Are you saving it?
Wait until you get to the right
I
point,
do not have that
and
self-control.
then I know I will love it so much more. So yes, but we knew I'm all about self-control.
Absolutely.
Anyway. Okay, so
obviously the multiverse concept being teased and stuff like that. What did we think? What do we know was coming down the line?
Yeah, we knew that Endgame / Spider-Man was going to be the end of Phase 3, and that Phase 4 was going to be starting, and that obviously Endgame was Endgame, and it was very much a full stop on things. At this point, we knew Black Widow was on its way. We knew that it was a prequel, although I suppose by the end of the Infinity Saga, we realised why it was a prequel, because you couldn't do a sequel. We knew that the Eternals was coming. It was a slightly weird one in terms of where it sits within Phase 4 and within the start of the multiverse, because it was announced right around the time that Infinity War was released, so 2018, before the 3 films that preceded it, which is a little bit odd. But so what you sorry, it's actually before 2 of the films that preceded it, I think. But when Endgame came out in April 2019, the summer of 2019, the first chunk of that Phase 4 slate was announced. So we knew about Black Widow, we knew about the Eternals, and then just after Endgame came out, we got the news about Shang-Chi and the Legends of the Ten Rings. We got the news about Doctor Strange 2, which had been rumoured, but we didn't really know a huge amount about. Everyone was expecting it to come, and then I think that was when they actually identified it as Multiverse of Madness. And then obviously there was also Thor, Love and Thunder, which was announced at the same time as well. So those 3 films were announced just after Endgame came out. So we had 5 films that we knew were coming down the line. And I think we discussed this sometime after Infinity War, but it was actually Spider-Man No Way Home was announced by Sony in the run-up to Infinity War, because it totally spoiled the cliffhanger of
the dusting,
Infinity War, and whether or not he was going to come back, and annoyed Marvel mightily. So if you count Spider-Man within the MCU as we do, obviously it was announced by Sony, not Marvel, but that gave us 6 films of this new saga that we knew about and were expecting. And I suppose I don't actually know when we started referring to it, or Marvel started referring to it as the multiverse and the
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 Multiverse Saga.
multiverse
Yeah.
saga, but none of those films was expressly about the multiverse until you got to Doctor Strange 2,
Yeah, when they
in terms of what we were expecting from it, because the Spider-Man, we knew it was called No Way Home, but that doesn't actually tell you anything about it being related
yes,
to.
whereas at least Doctor Strange 2, when they announced the title eventually, the Multiverse of Madness, it was pretty spot on that it was going to involve the multiverse. But like you say, yeah, Shang-Chi didn't imply multiverse. Thor: Love and Thunder didn't imply multiverse. So yeah,
and Black Widow and Eternals also, in terms of what we
yeah,
knew,
it didn't.
as in solidly
Yeah,
knew, don't tell us anything either. So it's kind of interesting looking back and thinking about like what were our sort of expectations going into this new saga, or into phase 4, I
yeah.
suppose.
I mean, I'm always optimistic, but I think I felt like it was always going to be pushing a rock up a mountain because you've just had this amazing storyline, amazing finish. How the hell are you going to top that? How the hell are you going to carry that on? On one hand, I was like, okay, if we're dealing with things like that, then that's cool because you can bring in different concepts and you can have some fun with it. But, and I believe, oh, how long was Kang teased for? I can't remember.
Uh,
Because obviously
within
he shows
the
up in
MCU, do
Loki
you
at
mean?
first.
He shows up in Loki and he stays around until the end of
Yes.
Quantumania.
But it was more not knowing the big bad because
Yeah.
even though in Infinity Saga we didn't know the big bad right away. It's not like they introduced Thanos in Iron Man or hinted at him and stuff like that. We got the 10 rings and that was really it. As you say, it was almost like they were finding their feet still. And in Avengers, when we finally knew the big bad, we hadn't had that yet. So it felt like yeah, I wasn't sure. Like as soon as we started talking about the multiverse, but Kang's very time travel kind of thing. So he kind of pops in. I mean, to be fair, in my head at the time, though, I was like, oh, I wonder if the Fantastic Four are turning up yet because dimension hopping and reality exploring is very much a Fantastic Four type thing. Maybe this is how we bring them in because they are a major Marvel superhero team, and they haven't been in before because the films suck, because Fox suck, kind of thing. I mean, I'll take that back when I talk about the actual FF films because I did actually like the first one, but the history they've got with it within the comics, it feels like in my head it felt like it was a good way they could have possibly bring them in because it would give them the proper treatment that they deserve rather than just being thrown away basically. But then in my head I was like, well, how do they bring them in? Because again, they are a really big thing, and to have had no mention of them at all in this entire saga. The same with X-Men and the mutants. I was like, how are they going to bring them in? Maybe this is how it is because again, they are a massive part of Marvel continuity, and we've had no mention of them in any way or even hints of them at this point. Which
Yeah.
I understand why, but like yeah, so that was kind of like it was a tough one. That was part of my hopes and dreams in the respect of I was hoping we were going to address that and go somewhere, but I didn't know how we were going to do it. And also, I mean, I did feel you feel a bit unmoored after having that. Like you say, we can clearly going through all the Infinity Gauntlet saga here with them collecting all the gens and Thanos being involved. I know where we're going. And then we've done that. I'm like, what now? Like, it feels like you have to have a break and a reset, but it doesn't work like that in the film industry and stuff like that. So, like, you
Yes.
need to do the next big thing. And how do you get higher than that? It's like, the first 24, bad guy, bigger bad guy, Dennis Hopper. But then how do you beat that? Yeah, you just get more mental. So, yeah.
Yes. And I think from my perspective, knowing as we were going in that there were the Eternals and
Yep.
Shang-Chi coming in, so those were two characters slash groups of characters who I obviously knew nothing
Yep.
about. So it sort of underlined the fact that actually a chunk of what they were going to be doing was starting over again. And we already knew that there were several actors within the MCU who had decided they didn't want to do
Yes.
anymore for whatever reason and written out in whatever way. So I think for me, I was sort of hoping that we would get a new cast of characters who were as, engaging and
I mean, that
exciting.
is the
and
challenge, isn't it? Because as you say, with Chris Evans and Downey Jr., they're big forces, they're big personalities, and they're
Yeah.
they're great, the characters, and they dominate the scenes they're in and stuff like that. And it feels really weird. And I completely get that. Yeah, it's almost like who's going to replace them, and are they going to have the same force of personality to keep everyone engaged? And I mean, like in theory, there are many, many absolutely enough characters that you can keep on going by, but it's introducing them at the right time so they don't just start afresh. You want to build them up a bit so people know who they are, and it's a really tough needle to thread. Like Thor's still around, we all know him. He wasn't going yet, but it's a real tough. Who is the Captain America or the Iron Man equivalent?
Yeah.
To move forward this stage, really tough. And I think Benedict Cumberbatch was, and Black Panther would have been great, but obviously, with what happened with Chadwick passing away, I don't think he had at this point. How do you know? Because had he?
He was very close
I
to
think
dying
because
at
it
this
came
point,
out of
I
no.
think.
His last, I know his last audio work was Black Panther. Was the What If? Yeah, it was because the what, because he did he voiced T'Challa in What If. I think that was his last Marvel thing.
Yeah, it was 2020 he died. So that would have been, they would have been thinking about another Black Panther movie
Yeah.
so I think that was originally, this is off the top of my head, was originally scheduled where Wakanda Forever
Yeah.
is, but obviously had a totally different approach because it was supposed to be the T'Challa Black Panther, not Shuri.
Absolutely. So I think that didn't help in some respects. Obviously, that changed because again, you could have had, because Tom Holland, Benedict, those, and they could have all been the faces still that people recognise and would go to see, while you also introduce these other characters like you did more of with Shang-Chi maybe, and other characters could have been brought in and built them up and stuff like that.
And just
anchored a bit. That's the word. Anchored it a bit. Yeah, because that was part of it. Because otherwise, it didn't feel like. Yeah, it didn't feel. It felt like you were on board without having these anchor characters to stabilize everything.
And so I think probably going into it, obviously not knowing what was going to come, I was hoping it was just going to be more of the same.
Yeah.
That actually every phase so far had built to a great film.
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing to remember, that although we had the Infinity Saga, it was 3 phases of films with 3 Avengers films at the end of each phase. So we had Avengers Assemble, the end of phase 1. Phase 2
Ultron.
was Ultron, and phase 3 was Infinity War and Endgame. So they were very much built around those elements. And so I think I was coming at it from the point of view of, I'm intrigued to see what they bring in next, what's coming down the line, who are these new characters, how are they going to affect the characters who we know and have met and like and love, like Doctor Strange and Thor and Spider-Man and Black Panther. And I suppose in terms of expectations, like, I genuinely thought that Marvel would just keep knocking it out the park like they always had done, which was probably naive.
Well, I can see why you think that, but then I guess part of the problem is it feels like I say, they just started trying to knock them out too quickly.
Yeah, which is something we'll
Yeah,
talk
when we
about
get to it.
when we get to it. I suppose probably the question is, was whatever came after the Infinity Saga, was it bound to be an anticlimax?
I mean, yeah,
And is that part of why we're looking this is a weird podcast episode to do, because we're both looking back from where we sit now and also trying to remember what it was like looking
yes,
forward
from where we were. Yes,
5 years ago. But it's was it always going to be an anticlimax, or is it because the films weren't as good?
I think a little from column A, a little from column B, because it was a tougher sell because of cast members going and things like that. And it's like it. It's like when if you're doing your step counting, and you have your 10,000 steps a day, and then one day you smash it with 20,000 steps, and the next day you're always going to get less.
Yeah,
and you're never going to hit that goal, but you build up to it again. So it's like it's always a tough act to follow because I genuinely cannot think how you could have done a better next thing straight away. Like, you do in a way have to mess around a bit and have some films that just go out rather than tying it together. And maybe we were all expecting instantly, because like we were saying, the Infinity Saga, when it started, was building the MCU rather than building towards this story. It was building towards the story, but we didn't know that. We thought we're just establishing the MCU, we're meeting all these characters, we're growing the place. It's like it needs to do that again. But our expectations were, cool, you've done that, what's next? Rather than let them breathe again, let them reset the status quo, because Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr. aren't in it anymore, so we need to relearn what the MCU is going to be without these giants in it. But that's not how it works with films and audience stuff like that. They're like, cool, entertain me more.
Yeah.
And it's not like you can take a sabbatical and, okay, we're going to go have a think about this. No, we need to release stuff. We need to get stuff out. We need to keep the ball rolling. We need to not let like DC catch up. We need to keep stirring stuff out. So I think possibly you're right. I think it was always destined to not be as good, but it could have been executed better. Possibly they could have taken more time. And that's not to say that some of these films aren't good. I do like some of these, before we go all negative on a thing, because I know we've got Eternals coming up.
Please don't stop watching.
Yes,
and
honestly, don't worry. I am still irritatingly optimistic about everything, and I do like Shang-Chi, and I do like. There are films I do like that are coming up. I know we're gonna have to get through the Eternals, but we'll do it together. Black Widow's on its way. We're gonna get some good reviews. It's gonna be good fun. But just as a general catch-all, yeah, it wasn't going to hit the same levels. It really wasn't, and that does suck. But there are also still good stuff to come. There is absolutely good stuff to come, because the amount of characters that are out there which they can use, and really interesting concepts and stories and stuff they can do, it's still out there. And I am firmly of the belief that they will still do it, because at the end of the day, a lot of these people do love doing this. And, Marvel do like money. And the best way to get money is to release good stuff. And I think they've been kicked in the teeth a bit now, as they've realised that, maybe we've churned out. Maybe the standards need to rise again. Maybe we need to have a rain check and get us sold. And I think we're back. I think we're on the right roads there.
So one of the things for me is, I think the biggest problem that the Infinity Saga created was that we all forgot how long they took to build to Endgame.
Yeah.
And I mean, even if you take it as a phased approach, so what I was saying before about phase 1, 2, and 3, phase 1 and 2 were 6 films each, and phase 3 was 10 films. That's actually a lot of time to build towards something. And when those things started, we as an audience did not know where it was going.
Yeah.
we, or the comic fans, had an inkling that it was going to be building towards a
Yep.
film of Thanos trying to collect the Infinity Stones. And as you've talked about a couple of times on the podcast already, in the comics, he clicks everyone away, and then on basically the next page, everyone gets
Yes,
clicked back
basically,
again,
yes.
and it's like, oh, okay. And so we didn't have the concept that it was going to be building to something this big and awesome. And I think the problem that created is that by forgetting that, everyone started phase 4 almost saying immediately, tell me what your end
Yes.
game is.
Yes,
Like,
where's your next end game?
Both literally and
Yeah.
figuratively. What is your
Yep.
end game? And actually, that's not how the MCU has
Yes,
worked
exactly. And it's
up to now.
and yeah, no, completely agree. I mean, yeah, and like even if I'm thinking about it when I was back then, as you say, just thinking about what could the next end game be, and in my head, a lot of the things that it could be were limited by the fact that, for example, I'm sure Galactus would be a great end game, but that's Fantastic Four, and at the moment, whereas I want the Fantastic Four to show up, I didn't know where we were with the rights to have the characters. So could they use Galactus yet? Because he'd be a fantastic big bad. Or you've got even Annihilus in the Annihilation Wave, which is a big negative zone type, massive, but that's a very spacey thing, which would be great. But I don't know if it would fit. Well, it could do. Again, these are big bads, but and again, anything involving Kang would just be a headache because it's time travel generally and things like that. So it was trying to, as you say, what's next? It's tough to work it out. But yeah, like I say, Galactus would have been, or Phoenix. You could even have the Phoenix Saga. But again, that's X-Men, and we don't know where we are with that at this point.
It's X-Men, and they've done Phoenix twice.
Has been, and not very good. That's the problem.
2 separate things.
So it feels like if they're going to do, and obviously the mutants are coming, X-Men are coming, and I'm hoping that it means we finally get the proper Dark Phoenix Saga, where it's not wank. Or not really disappointing.
Yes. It's difficult because one of the things we do strive to do in this podcast is to put everything in the context that we had at the time.
Yeah.
And I think part of the reason the Multiverse Saga has been considered such a failure is just because we were so spoiled with the first 24 23 24. I'd count Black Widow as still fitting into the really good films category. And we got so spoiled by that when they started having things that missed quite as hard as they missed, and the fact that they came right on top of one another, that's perhaps why we've started looking back on the Multiverse Saga in a different way, when actually in 2-3 years, no, it's only going to be 2 years' time, when we get to the actual end of Secret Wars and the end of the Multiverse Saga, we may look back on it in a slightly different, slightly better
you never
light,
know,
which, I mean, it's not going to undo the terrible
but
films.
It may be, the same concept with watching the film, and if it starts badly but ends strongly, you then see it in a much better light, whereas if it starts strongly and ends a bit then you tar the whole thing. So you never know.
Exactly.
It may end really strong, and we may be going, okay, that was cool.
And then we'll listen back to this episode in 2 years and be like, oh man, they were ragging on it so hard.
What do they know? So yeah, like we'll wait and see, won't we?
We will.
And with that, that's our show for this week. If you want to rewatch along with us, next week we'll be diving into the first film of the Multiverse Saga, Black Widow.
You can follow our show at MarvelingPod on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube, or email us your thoughts on geeks@marvelingpod.com.
And if you'd enjoyed the show, we'd love you to tell just one other person about it. That's all. Just one. Go on, do it now while you're on your phone anyway.
And that's it. Thanks very much, Dave.
Thanks very much, Ollie.